I leave it all up to our producer, who when he stops finding it interesting, then he cuts it, which I think is a great test.
The podcast will last 2 or 3 minutes, I think.
Hello, and welcome to The Social Economist, perhaps Europe's most competitive social economy podcast. Welcome to Season 3. We're back, and that means we're taking on new topics, having new discussions, and speaking with some well-informed guests on the issues that matter most. We're going to be talking about the big picture, the changing policy landscape which is impacting us all. We'll also be taking on some of the big topics of the day. That means energy, discussing the topic of energy transition, which is actually perhaps an area where social economy has a lot to offer. And it also means defence, something which is really shaping all the policies which are being developed at the moment. 5% is a lot of GDP, and if that's what European governments really plan to spend on our security, can the social economy afford to ignore it? Make sure to tune in as we go through these episodes on these key topics with interesting guests and discussions that will hopefully get the conversation started. Welcome to the third episode of this third season of The Social Economist. This is the concluding episode in our first mini-series about the changing policy landscape affecting social enterprises. We've had some very interesting conversations so far with FEBEA, the European Network of Ethical Banks and Alternative Finance Providers, Sustainable Public Affairs, Brussels-based think tank, a lobby organisation who is advocating for more sustainability and better policies to encourage sustainability. Now we're going to be talking to somebody who we've heard from on the podcast once before, Malo Bourel from Impact France, one of Europe's leading national networks of social enterprises, obviously based in France. We've been working together for a number of years, and I know Malo has been very active through the Business for a Better Tomorrow coalition, a group of networks who wanted to put social and impact economy front and center of the last European elections in these kind of policies affecting social enterprises, but also more widely, corporate governance and reporting more broadly. It was a really great conversation we had, and I'm hoping you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed having it.
My name is Malo Bourel. I'm the head of public affairs at Impact France Movement. And for those who don't know us yet, we are the leading business organization in France for companies committed to the ecological and social transition. We gather and present over 30,000 businesses of all sizes and sectors with the aim to unify their voice and demonstrate that an ecological and social alternative to traditional employers' organization exists and must be heard. And because we believe the European level is crucial for the development of impact entrepreneurship, we launched the Business for Better Tomorrow coalition more than 1 year ago, something like that, to ensure our voice is heard and to propose concrete solutions to European decision makers for more competitive, sustainable, and fair European economy.
Loyal listeners to the podcast will remember you were on already on the podcast once before to talk about the coalition, the manifesto, because it was all about the European elections in 2024. I guess things have changed a bit since the European elections.
Yes.
How do you see those changes? I mean, in the context of this, sustainable social push which was going on. How's that been going from your perspective since the elections?
Yeah, in a way, it's quite striking, even a bit ironic to see how the 2024 European elections really marked, I think, a turning point in the debate on sustainability, on social regulations. I think we all clearly see a shift from, let's say, a post-Paris agreements era, where there was a strong political will behind the European Green Deal, for instance, which, of course, while not perfect, seems to provide a necessary strategic framework. And now we are more in a period for more than, let's say, the beginning of a new mandate of the European Parliament, and with a new commission of what we can call, let's say, an ecological backlash, with the rise of conservative and far-right parties at the European Parliament, but also in different national governments of different member states. This situation is also coupled with let's say, a dominant economic discourse that has created a really important pushback against environmental sustainable policies. So they are being framed as being too costly or for citizens and businesses. And this narrative is unfortunately echoed by some parts of the business community. We also see, I think, the fact that the new European Commission still has the same president, but with other commissioners and with new priorities. I believe the European Commission has pivoted strongly towards let's say, a economic competitiveness and sovereignty agenda, which is quite different than the last mandate of Ursula von der Leyen. And let's say that instead of leveraging our high social and environmental standards as a foundation for new protective European competitiveness, I believe that the current trajectory is towards more simplification and maybe deregulation at some points. The European Commission really has the idea to reduce bureaucracy for companies so that they could better compete with other economies like the US or China or others. And this has led to a real retreat on many foundational regulations. I think we will talk about that later during the podcast, but which is not only bad for the ecological transition, but also creates very damaging instability for European businesses. So, and for an entrepreneur, for a business leader, uncertainty is a poison that makes it very impossible or more difficult to invest and to plan a strategy for the long term. So we have this situation, and I think it's also good to have in mind. I think everybody in Europe see that we have let's say a new geopolitical situations. We see that Europe's position has also weakened considerably on the international stage, with global economic decline that is now quite visible. And I think the recent trade agreement with the US is a concrete example of Europe's powerlessness to assert its model. So the risk is also that our economy becoming a catch-up economy rather than a leader economy.
And interesting you mentioned the US trade deal. I mean, I haven't, as you can imagine, gone into that much depth with it because it's, you know, a bit grander than social enterprises in general. Do you think that this is going to have a big impact, this sort of new relationship between the EU and the US?
Yes, for sure. I think the if we talk about the agreement between the US and the EU, that I think there are two things to have in mind. The first one is regarding our point of view. For the first time for a long time, Europe stops to try to impose its model in commercial agreements. Like for a long time, Ursula von der Leyen said that a few years ago, the ambition of the EU was, and it was assumed, to put in place ambitious environmental and social standards, and to, thanks to free trade agreements with other parts of the world, negotiate with other part of the world to impose its models to other companies and to other countries and part of the world. What we see with the EU-US agreements is, in fact, that the US took the lead. I think it shows completely the fact that Europe is not that powerful and failed to impose, or at least to be on the same step as the US. There are, of course, the trade barriers. There is also this agreement on energy. And if we talk about this agreement on energy, we see that if the EU really wants to reach its climate ambitions that are very ambitious and linked to the Paris Agreement. We talk about climate neutrality in 2050. We have to stop using fossil fuels. We have to go towards a new energetic mix in Europe. And this agreement is just the US saying to the EU, you have to choose my fossil fuels energy, and you can't do anything else. So there are implications. There are implications for impact businesses that export to the US because they, at some points, are concerned by the trade barriers, and it's tragic.
A very good point on energy, and I think actually energy is one of the topics which is super interesting. I think for the social economy, and it has all these interesting business models. So we will have some episodes also about energy in this series later on as well.
When we talk about energy, we talk about companies. I mean, when you are a company, a social company, an impact company, any company in Europe, you
Hmm.
must pay your bills. You have to pay your energy bills, and of course, this kind of situation has a direct effects on their businesses. So yeah, I think it's
No,
important
no,
to
for
also
sure.
have that in
Yeah,
mind.
but no, anyway, that's a really nice interlude. But coming back to the topic we were really focusing on, which is about changing European environments with regulations. I think you're one of the few people I know who really gets into the detail of what's going on with these regulations and this omnibus. Which is not a really cool bus. It's a really boring and long document. And there's corporate sustainability reporting directive and this due diligence directive. I mean, how's that going to have an impact on all the work you've been doing over the last years as well?
It's a lot of details, so I will try to be as much clear as I can. A few months ago, the European Commission, in this new agenda of competitiveness, of simplification, published its first omnibus package. Is, let's say, a perfect illustration of this new direction taken by the European Commission. And while initiatives like the Clean Energy Fuel Deal are a step in the right direction, aiming at accelerating our industry's decarbonizations, aiming at accelerating the emergence of a more circular economy, we have this omnibus package that is the source of great concern for many of our members, for many, I think, of business leaders in Europe and even elsewhere. So basically, this omnibus package proposes to simplify several key green legislations, including the CSRD, so the Corporate Sustainable Reporting Directive. It's a little bit technical, and the Corporate Sustainable Due Diligence Directive. So these are two very important regulations, have the ambition to transform the economy and to guide all European companies to be more responsible. And so for impact companies, for companies that are committed to the ecological and social transition, this are not simple regulations. They are regulations that are essential roadmaps for the transitions and tool to protect them against unfair competition. So while we have always supported the need for simplification as Impact France, as D4BT, because we know that maybe these regulations are not perfect and must be adapted at operational realities of companies. What we see is that the proposal of the Commission and the way the current negotiations are happening or creating, let's say, a level of instability that is very deeply damaging. It risks undermining the very principle that are at the core of our, let's say, future resilience. It penalizes the pioneers, so impact social entrepreneurs who have already invested heavily to comply, that have a direct impact, a positive impact on society. So this situation is very difficult for businesses, for sure, and many of whom are not lost to project themselves into the long-term project. That companies are on their way to comply and to pave the way to a transformation of the business model into a more sustainable economy. Now we are going back and we are completely lost in the process. So of course, this a very important impact for European companies, for Europe, for impact companies, and it's also sad because these regulations, they also add the ambition to protect our companies towards, let's say, unfair competition with other and with extra European companies that are, let's say it this way, less advanced on ecological, social, sustainable transition. So yeah, I think it's a little bit sad, but we are continuing to work with you with other people to find a way to pave the way for let's say a quick resolution, a quick adoption of regulation, and to safeguard the ambition of the directives.
What I can't understand is that they introduced all of these policies and regulations, and they were almost going to have an impact and an effect. And then they changed it, but they didn't change it to something specific or clear. They just kind of took it all away and left everybody questioning what's going on. And that doesn't seem to have made things simpler or better. It just seems to have made things worse because everyone's now just waiting to find out what's going to happen. And then, of course, if something does happen, how long will that last? I mean, yeah. What do I know? What do I know? What do you think are the main challenges coming up in this new regulatory environment for impact enterprises? Or are there also some opportunities in this new context that Europe is entering into?
No, it's a good question. I think this ongoing backlash, ecological backlash, presents a few critical challenges for impact enterprises. And in addition to the, let's say, traditional or classical problems we've always faced with access to finance, with competitions, and with other topics that I won't mention here. First, I would tend to say that this situation creates a penalty for pioneers, a penalty for companies that put impact first. We see that the companies today that made the choice to lead the transition by integrating impact into the business model are often now at a disadvantage. And that efforts are no longer being fully valued by public policy and can even become a handicap against competitors who don't respect the same standards. So we see, I think the first main problem is the fact that there is no penalty for pioneers, and that the reason why we need to have more perspectives and not diluting all the ecological, sustainable progress we made this last years. Second point is, of course, the fact that we talk about instability, and instability hurts our attractiveness for talents, hurts our capacity of investments, hurts our capacity to invest and to project our strategy on the long term. And impact companies, impact enterprises by nature, are long-term oriented. So when the framework is unstable, when governments send contradictory signals, it becomes much harder for them to attract talent, to secure the funding needed for innovation, to secure the funding needed for the activities and the development of impact projects on territories. So this is in addition to the classic challenges impact enterprises already face. I think these are the main 2 points I would tend to raise. I'm sure there are plenty of other challenges, but let's say that instability and the unfair competition that is more important now than ever are the main two, let's say, not new, but problems and challenges they have to face in addition to classical problems.
When you ask people in this sector or space, what are the challenges? Nobody has a short list, so those are two good ones to mention. And in terms of like opportunities, do you think there's any kind of opportunities for impact enterprises now coming out of this new context around competitiveness, innovation, this new startup and scale up strategy, 28th regime, anything which strikes you as like, oh, wow, okay, this is going to be a good thing?
It's true that Omnibus is not a good package, a good legislation for impact companies. On the other hand, we see other pieces of legislation that are being discussed at the EU level that are very interested for impact companies. I talked about the Clean Industrial Deal. In the Clean Industrial Deal, there are some proposals coming from the Commission that we are pushing for a very long time. When we talk about public market and integrating sustainable and proximity criteria in the public command, of course, it must help impact companies to differentiate for other competitors. When we talk about Circular Economy Act, we have a regulation that we hope so, will create an ecosystem that would favor the emergence of circular economy organizations and companies in Europe. So this go in the right direction. You talked about the 28th regime. It's also a good opportunity for impact startup to scale, to have more access, more easy access to European markets. So of course it goes in the right direction, and I hope so. I mean, it's asked for a long time from the startup sectors. I'm hope so that this regime will help a lot of startup to scale up and maybe to create European impact champions to compete with traditional champions and with Chinese and American champions. So everything is not that bad. Some regulations that also goes in the right direction. We know it's a challenging context, but when you see and when you have a look at the global situation of the economy, I talk about France right now, but when you have a look at the situation in the tech sector, for instance, you see that climate and in social and impact startup, they are in the same situation than the other startups. So we don't see because they are, let's say, ecological backlash. We don't see the fall of all impact startups in France. We have several reasons to continue to full of hope, and if we're not full of hope, I don't know who will be.
There's plenty of challenges which impact startups are going to have to deal with. So there's plenty of opportunity in there as well.
And when you are look at when you're looking at the public opinion, for instance, you see that in the survey, the vast majority of citizens in Europe, the vast majority of civil society, they understand the urgency of sustainable transition, of ecological transition. We also see that the most important thing to have in mind is, of course, I talked about the fact that an important part of the let's say economic world is pushing for a deregulation agenda, but we also see a lot of companies that even with the political shift, even with the ecological backlash, even with the pressure from the Trump administration, a lot of businesses continue to say, and because they know that the transition is a matter of survival for them, that they are convinced, a lot of them are still convinced that it will ultimately become a key competitive advantage. Just to give you an example, just a few weeks ago, we mobilized over 400 business leaders to sign a tribune, a co-head in France, calling on Europe to maintain the 2040 emission reduction targets. So this shows that even if maybe we don't already see it, we don't always see it, there are still a lot of business leaders that really want to take the lead on these topics and see the transition continue. So I'm convinced that we are in a difficult period for sure, for sustainability, for impact entrepreneurship, but I'm pretty convinced that these topics, this subject will return to the forefront. And because we don't really have a choice, but to converge towards a shared path. Eventually, we will all understand that our social and environmental standards are not a weakness, but a strength, and the very foundation of a new competitiveness to getting out of our dependencies.
Of course, my last question is, as always, do you have a podcast you'd also like to recommend for the listeners?
I still love this question. Yes, I have a podcast recommendation that I would love to share with our listeners. So this podcast is called Loin des yeux, loin du cœur, which can be translated by Out of sight, out of care. And it's a podcast produced by our former co-president at Impact France Movements, Eva Sadoun, that explores the connection between economics and care showing how taking care is not just a social component, but a powerful vector of economic transformation. So it's a very interesting podcast that challenges the idea that vulnerability is a taboo, and that shows how vulnerability can, in fact, be a strength in both our society and our economy.
Oh wow, that sounds like a great recommendation. No, cool. I'll have to check that one out. It becomes more and more challenging to recommend podcasts in every episode of the Social Economist as we go further through this, and I have to discover more and more podcasts. But still, I'm happy to always dig deep and find something to suggest. Perhaps another non-politics related one. I think I'm doing very well to not only recommend politics podcasts this season. The Crime Agents. It's actually quite interesting, although again quite different, looking at, particularly in the UK, topics around crime, policing, and also crime reporting as well. So quite an interesting inside scoop. So anyone at a loose end maybe wants to check that out. I'd like to just thank Malo again. It's been a real pleasure to be able to work with him on these policy areas over the last few years. And we hope, of course, there'll be an opportunity to keep working on these policy areas in the next years as well, and that more will be done to bring them back, and hope that more can be done to improve the regulation to encourage sustainability and putting impact into action, not just for those that care about it, but for all enterprises. Thank you then to Malo, thank you to Jan Kishivara, who produces this podcast, and thank you to the European Commission for making this possible. Next week we're going to be returning with the next episode in our season 3, which is the first episode of our second mini-series, looking at the topic of energy. This is a really fascinating topic, and I've really enjoyed having the conversations with very many key actors in the energy sphere in Europe. Make sure to tune in. Until then, thank you and goodbye.